Okay, we're on the top of Kuvav Amid Aleph. So, Tana Rabbanan Chalitza Mutas Keshera. A mistaken chalitza is kosher. Ezui Chalitza Mutas. What is this mistaken chalitza? So, Reish Lakish says the mistaken chalitza that's acceptable still is called Sha'omer Mol Chalot B'Kachat Hakon. So they deceive him. They say to him, "Do the chalitza, and that's how you're going to marry her." Meaning to say, they want him to do the chalitza, but he was resisting. So they say, do the chalitza, and that's how you'll marry her. So they trick him, and Rabbi Lakish says still acceptable. So I'm Rabbi Yochanan. Yochanan argues. He says, "I need shown that bein sheniskaven hu v'lo niskaven he bein sheniskaven he v'lo niskaven hu chalitza sapsua." I learned that even if only one of them has intent and the other one does not have intent, it's going to be a disqualified chalitza. Until unless they both have the proper chalitza. And you say that if they trick him and they tell him, do the chalitza so that you can marry her, you're saying it's valid? Because Rabbi Yochanan disagrees strongly with Reish Lakish's explanation of what chalitza mutas is. Ela kol she'amar lo chalotzla amanas shetiten chamatayim zus. What's this chalitza? Anything where you say to her, do the chalitza on the condition that she's going to give to you 200 zuz. Meaning you promise him that if you do the chalitza, she'll give you 200 zuz, and then she doesn't give it to you because it's basically it's a tanai. It's a time means conditional, but we say that a condition. The Rashi tells us we learn from the Gemara. In Ksuvos, that a conditional Ksuva, a condition is only accepted in a circumstance where you could appoint an agent to do that task on your behalf. Since you can't appoint an agent to do the chalitza on your behalf, therefore the condition is not binding. And since the condition is not binding, she doesn't owe the money, but the chalitza is still acceptable. And indeed, the Gemara, so therefore, according to Reish Lakish, the chalitza mutas is where you trick the person by saying, I'm going to give you do the chalitza so that she'll be married to you. According to Rabbi Yochanan, the chalitza mutas is where she says, give the chalitza, and then I'll give you 200 zuz. And she doesn't have to in the end, but it's still a valid chalitza. Tanya Namiyachi, we have a brayso says something similar. Chalitza mutas keshera. Mistaken chalitza is kosher, and ezu chalitza mutas. What is this scenario? Kol she'omer chalitza l'manasha titein chamatayim zuz. Where you say, give her the chalitza, and then she'll give you $200. Or 200 zuz, much more than $200. Ma'isa, be'isha achashanaf ofnei yavam. There's once an incident where a woman fell to Yibam with a man, she'ein haganullah. This man is not appropriate for her. And they said to him, chalitza almanasha titein chamatayim zuz. And they said to him, give her the chalitza, and she'll give you 200 zuz. But then she did the chalitza, didn't want to pay her. She didn't want to pay him. Mechia says it's okay. He follows Rabbi Yochanan is consistent with this price of Rabbi Chia. Huda also coming to Rabbi Chia bar Abba. There was once a person who came for Rabbi Chia bar Abba. There was a case of Yibam and Chalitza came for Rabbi Chia bar Abba. Amarwa biti amodi. So he says, my daughter, stand up, meaning stand up and do yibum with him. So Amrawe ima. So the mother of this girl said to her, you want to help her? She doesn't want to do yibum. She should stay where she is. She should be yosheves. She should sit. Don't make her stand and do this chalitza. Amarwa, so Rabbi Abba says to the girl, Yadasle, do you know this guy who wants to do Yibam with you? Amarwa, so she says, yes, I know him. And Memona, he sees the money of her. He wants to do this Yibam so he could go through her money. Amarwa, so that they said to the girl, do you not want to do Yibam with this man? Amarwa, she says, I don't want to do it. So Amarwa, chalotzla. So Rabbi Abba does a trick on the guy because the guy didn't want to do chalitza. So he said, do the chalitza and then you'll marry her. So chalotzla and then you'll be married to her. With Basar the Chalitza, but after he did a Chalitza with him. Steve, you have a question? You're unmuted. Okay, I'll mute you. So he says, after he did the Chalitza with him, Basar the Chalitza, after he did the Chalitza with her, so then Rabbi Rava says to the guy, guess what? You can't marry her anymore. Minach Ipsloa. I disqualified her from marrying you. But at least now, because why can't she do Yibum with you? Because you did this Chalitza, which is questionable. But now, at the very least, do a Chalitza Maliyasa, now we can force you to do a good Chalitza so she can marry other people in the world. Bas Chamud Rav Papa, another case, Rav Papa, the daughter of Rav Papa's mother-in-law, she fell to Yibam, and this guy was not appropriate for her. Also coming to Rav Papa. So then so what happened? So also coming to Abai, they came before Abai. Abai says, Abai was going to do this method, this trick of Reish Lakish. He says, marry her, do Chalitza, and then you'll be married to her. So Rav Papa says to Abai, but what about Rabbi Yochanan? Normally Rav Papa will say, Rabbi Yochanan, but there's Rabbi Yochanan say that's not okay. So he says, well, so Abai says to Rav Papa, how should I get him to give her the Chalitza? So he says, so Rav Papa says, tell him this. I'm like Rabbi Yochanan. Says, do the Chalitza and she'll give you the $200. Then after he gives the Chalitza, so now Abai says to the woman, go give this guy the 200 zuz. Rav Papa says, no. She doesn't have to give the money. She could say, I was just joking. I'm not serious. Didn't we learn There's a little bit of a different explanation from before. Before we had said Rashi said it's just not binding. Now she could give off a different claim. What is Papa saying? She can give off the claim. I was joking. That I was joking. Didn't we learn and if he's running away from a jail, there's a ferry. Told dinar, he offers him a lot of money to take him away. He says, I'll give you a dinar, way higher than the normal fare. And then the guy gets in there, he did the ferryman only gets the typical price because he could say Mishat Anibach. So we see that he's allowed to say to him, I was joking with you. I was not serious. It wasn't a real deal. So that's why. So that's what I don't have to pay the regular amount. And so too also over here. Here too, she could say I was joking. I don't have to pay the 200 zuz. So Papa says, so Abai says to Papa, where's your father? Rashi says there was a type of jealousy because Abai had no parents and he was like so impressed that this person was able to, Papa was younger, was able to come up with such sharp answers. Amrei b'masa. He says he's in the city. Where's your mother? Amrei b'masa. Abai put his eyes on him, meaning he was jealous, and Rav Papa's parents died. It's a very strange story at the end. That why did they die under these circumstances? But I'll leave that. Tana Rabbanan chalitza mutaz keshera. Okay, so we say a mistaken chalitza is explained two different ways. One by like Reish Lakish, one like Rabbi Yochanan. But it's keshera. Get muta, but a mistaken get is possible. Chalitza meusis, a forced chalitza, pesua is disqualified. Get musa, forced get is kosher. Hechidami. So the Gemara asks the question here. Wait, by the way, let's go back. What is get mutas? The mistaken get that's disqualified. Rashi says, if she doesn't fulfill the explanation, the condition. So in the first case, if she doesn't fulfill the condition, it's still a good chalitza. But in this case, since you can do a get through an agent and it's a valid get, therefore it is a valid condition. And so therefore if you don't do the condition upon which the get was promised or given, then it's not going to be a valid get. So the Gemara says, "Hey, Chidami, what is the definition of this chalitza mutas or chalitza meusa? Idam arotzani." So the Gemara is asking the question: what is the definition of this get meusa, which is kosher, and chalitza that was forced, which is disqualified? So the Gemara says, "Idam arotzani." If he says, I want to give the get, I feel chalitza nami. Also, the chalitza that's forced is okay. And if he doesn't say that, I want to give it, then get nami lo. Then the get itself is no good. So what is this get meusa, which is okay? This forced get, which is okay, and this chalitza meusa, which is no good. So Gemara says, this is what it is. Chalitza mutas olam kosher. Mistaken chalitza is always good. The get mutal or impossible. Mistaken get, like this conditional get, is always no good. Chalitza meusis, the get meusa, forced chalitza and a forced get, zimnin kosher, zimnin puzzle. Sometimes okay, sometimes not okay. So if he in the end he says I want to do it, that's a kosher chalitza and a kosher get. If he doesn't say I want to do it, it's disqualified. Chalitza disqualified get. The Tanya Yakrivo. So we say with respect to a carbon that was brought in as a voluntary offering. It says Yakrivo. So you shall bring the offering as a voluntary offering before God. Melamed. It says Yakrivo. So this teaches us Melamed shekofino. So that we force him. If he says that if he had made a vow to bring a sacrifice, we force him to bring it. So we force him until he says I want to do it. So too in this case, we force the ban, we place pressure on him to give the get until he says I want to do it. This get can be forced by a Jewish court, but it cannot be forced by a non-Jewish court. That we do the chalitza, even though the chalitza can happen, even though we don't recognize the person. Rashi says, Yavam v'Yevama shabau lefanenu. Let's say Yavam and Yevama, they came before us. They came in front of us, lachot, to do the chalitza. Ve'enan umakirim bo shu Yevama. We don't recognize that we can't determine for sure that he's her Yavam. Nevertheless, niskakam bezdin v'choltzim. The bezdin interacts with them and does the chalitza. And so too by Miyun, the whole next chapter is going to be talking about Miyun. That's where a young girl rejects the marriage that she was placed into by her mother or brother. The court listens to the Miyun even though they don't recognize her. So therefore, since the court gets involved with the chalitza and the miyun, therefore we don't write the document of the chalitza unless the court recognizes them. Rashi says, "Ein kos get chalitza." Rashi says, "Eidim aroim b'chalitza u'b'miyun." The witnesses who see the chalitza and the miyun, ein kos v'nosam. They don't write this down and give it to her that she could have like a receipt, unless they recognize that this is literally the Yavam and the Yevama. And so since Rashi says we only write it if we recognize the person, because maybe she's not the Yevama, and then we wouldn't want something terrible happen, because so the Gemara now says, why? What's our concern? We're concerned the court is going to make a mistake. If the witnesses say, we saw that she did the chalitza in front of us from such and such a person, we're concerned maybe she'll show this document to another court and they'll rely upon it. And they won't check if this person who wrote this get if this person who is written in this document is really her Yevama or not, and then they'll allow her to get married. So therefore we don't write. So we see, since the court will do the chalitza, even if they don't recognize this person, we don't write the document on that basis. The Rava Didei Omer, whereas Rava himself says, this was the teaching of Rav. Rava says, actually, Ein Cholton Elam Kemakirin, Beimaman Elam Kemakirin. Actually, the court should only do the chalitza if they know the person, and the miyun if they know the girl and her husband. And therefore, the witnesses can write the document for chalitza, even though they don't know the person, because and get miyun. And so too, they can write the document of miyun al pishay makirin v'lo chayshinan lebezdin. So we don't have to be concerned about a mistake in court. So now we're on the top Mishnah on Kuv Vav Amud mitzvah chalitza. So this mitzvah chalitza, bahu v'yevemto bezdin. So he comes with his yevama, with this girl, with this woman who needs the chalitza. They come to the court. So they give him good advice. We already saw what this means. They say, go. If she's not the right age as you, similar in age, then don't you even do chalitza. As it states, the elders of the town saw him and they called out to him. And she says, and she says the verse, my Yavam does not want to keep up his brother's name in Israel. He doesn't want to marry me. He doesn't want to be my Yavam. And he says, he says, I don't want to marry her. And they say this in the Hebrew. And then the Yevama comes close to him in front of the eyes of the court. She removes his shoe from his foot, and she spits on the ground in front of him, saliva that's visible to the court. What's visible? The Gemara is going to say it's visible coming out of her mouth, not just on the ground. And then she responds and she says, this is what we do to the man who does not uphold the house of his brother. Up until this point, they would read it to the verse, however, when Rav Hyrcanus used to arrange the chalitzas underneath this tree in Kfar Eitam, the Gemara is called Parsha. Rav Hyrcanus would finish the entire passage until V'nikra Shmo B'Yisrael Beis Chalutza. Now he would read the next verse. It says, and his house is called in Israel the house of the removed shoe. Mitzvah b'dayanan vo mitzvah b'talmidim. This phrase, V'nikra Shemo B'Yisrael Beis Chalutza. Now, this phrase that you shout out, this house will now be called in Israel the house of the removed shoe. That's a mitzvah for the judges to say. It's more mitzvah b'talmidim, and it's not a mitzvah for the students to say. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says mitzvah kol onim shamu amar chalutza. Now, Rabbi Yehuda says the mitzvah on all the students there to say this phrase based chalutza now. So Amar Rabbi Yehuda mitzvah chalitza. So Rabbi Yehuda taught about the mitzvah of chalitza. Korah, that she reads the passage, v'korei, and then he reads the passage. That she reads me'en yevami, and then he reads lo chafatzti l'kachta. Then v'choates, then she removes the shoe, v'rokakar, then she spits on the ground, v'korah, and then she reads the passage, that's how Rabbi Yehuda says is the verse, the order. Mar says, well, my kamashmon, what's Rabbi Yehuda adding? Masnisan he. This is literally what our Mishnah just said. So the Mar says, a kamashmon mitzvah hachi. This is the ideal way to do it. But if he does it out of order, it's not going to be a problem. It's not going to be disqualifying. Tanya now, we have a price which says, Ben shehiktim chalitza rakika, Ben shehiktim rakika chalitza masha asa asa. It doesn't matter whether you did the removal of the shoe before the saliva, which is the ideal way, or whether you spit on the ground prior to whether she spit on the ground prior to the chalitza, that what she's done is done, and it's acceptable. Amar Abaye Haiman Demakri Get Chalitza or Likra Lidida. So Abaye says this person who's reading the get, this document of chalitza, he's reading the verses to her. You shouldn't read it to her lo l'chudei va'avo yivmi l'chudei. You shouldn't read it as lo and then avayimi. No, he did not. He wants to take me. Meaning in Hebrew, it means he does not want to take her. He does not want to be my yavam. But if you separate the lo, it means the opposite. So you have to be careful not to read it like that. The mashma avo yivami. It implies that my yavam my brother-in-law wants to do yibum with me. El lo avayim v'mi. You have to read it all together. V'lo likrei l'didai. And when you tell the man to read it, don't say lo l'chudei and chafatzti l'chudei. Don't separate the lo from chafatzti, because then it would sound like the opposite, that I do want to marry her. Temashna chafatzti l'kachta. So you have to be careful how you say that. El lo chafatzti l'kachta. You have to put it all together. Rava says, actually, avsuki milsahi. Avsuki milsa lesom. But that's the normal breathing and spacing of the words. That's not going to be a problem. So even if he would say like that, lo and chafatzti l'kachta, according to Rav, would still be okay. Rav Ashi Ashkei or Rav Kahana to Kamitzdar Makre Lo Avayiv me. Rav Ashi found Rav Kahana that he was very meticulous, and he was saying Lo Avayiv me. That meaning to say my Yavam did not want to marry me. The basic, he was emphasizing that there was no pause in between the recitation of those words. So Amarelo Savai Mara the Rava. Don't you agree with Rava that you have to make a pause? He says Rava would admit in this case by below avayimi that we require that you don't stop, because if you would stop, it would imply that it was not referring to the first clause where he said Me'en yivami la'akim la'achav Shem b'Yisrael. But so there, Rava requires you to pause, because otherwise it means the opposite. But by the verse of O Chafatz Kachta, which is where he starts to read it, we don't have that concern. Says the Gemara, Amar Baya Haiman, the custom Kita v'chalitzasa, a person who's writing a receipt that she gave the chalitza luchtov hachi. You should write as follows: Akarinu etida min me'en yivami aravo yivami. So you have to write it as follows. You should say, we caused her to read from me'en yivami until avo yivami. Like the verse starts out by saying me'en yivami lakachat hakim shem b'Yisrael lo avo yivami. So you start up by saying, you write those words from me'en yivami ad avo yivami. Va'akrinu l'didei, and then I cause him to read from min lo ad lo chafatzi l'kachta until the verse until ad l'kachta. So there, if you look at the verse says v'niksha yivamto, it says lo. There it says in the words these follows. It says you should not write the word chafatzti. V'akrinu l'dida min kacha v'ad chalutza now. So what's the issue going on here? So Rashi says the issue is that this receipt does not have lines on it. It doesn't have what's called sirtut. And so therefore, since there's no lines, you're not allowed to write the whole verse. You should just write a portion of it. Because we learn in the Gemara in Gittin, in kos v'nteva below sirtut. We don't write a word without sirtut. But that ain't close from dalatevus. You don't write 4 words. You have to write less. Sirtut is the halacha Moshe Messina. The Torah scroll has to have sirtut on it. We have 4. You can't write a Torah scroll without sirtut. Sirtut are lines in the Torah. You need 42 lines on every Torah scroll has 42 lines. So since you can't have since you can't have seer to it with less than 4 words, they say since if you have 4 words, you need seer to it. Therefore, he says in this case, don't write the 4 words together. Marazutra Mesarte, because of the cool parashas. Marazutra says no big deal. I'll just take a seer to it knife, a seer to it instrument. I have one, of course, because in the Torah scroll, even if you don't make your own cloth, if you erase, you have to redo the seer to it, and whenever you make a mistake, you have to erase. So therefore, even if you're not making the cloth, you need a seer to it pen, a seer to it knife, and so therefore, Marazutra says, I'll just make my own seer to it, and I'll write the whole parsha. So Maskefo Marbar Idi Valo Nitan Kasek. So he says, yeah, but there's another problem. Then the other problem is you're not supposed to write a passage on itself. You're not supposed to write your own pasuk. Because we learned to Maseches Gittin, Ein Kos from Megillah Tino Kos Lamibah. You're not supposed to write a separate verses. So therefore, Velchas Hakavasi de Marzutra. But the law is like Marzutra, you could just do the sirtut and then you can write the 4 words together. So the Gemara says, let's say you spit, let's say she spits, and then the wind took it and blew it away before it reached in front of him. It's not considered spit. My time. What's the reason? We require her to spit in front of him, and so therefore, since the spit never got in front of him, it's no good. He aruka who goes. Let's say she's very tall and he's shorty. Excuse me, I skipped. Who aruch he goes. So let's say he's tall and she's short. And for sure, she spits on the ground. It was in front of him, and then it's going to be okay. Because Koato Aruach, he come in front of it. It's still going to be considered in front of him. He Aruka who goats. Let's say she's tall and he's short, but we require the spit to actually come in front of him because she's very tall, so it wouldn't necessarily fall right down in front of him. Then it can go wherever it needs to go. So then we say, Amarava, Acha Tuma Varakta. Let's say she ate the garlic and spit Acha Gargishta Varakta. Or let's say she ate some of this soil from the ground and then spit. She's done nothing. My time, what's the reason why it doesn't count? V'yarka may atzma. We need it to come specifically from her. That's why the custom is for the woman on the day of the chalitza not to eat, because we want to make sure that it's saliva coming from her and not from the food that's in her mouth. Rava and Rava taught, Srichi Dayani Umichse Ruka Kinafak Mipuma Yevamos. The judges need to see the saliva as it exits her mouth. Because it says Leineas Kenim V'yarka. That it says in the verse, they bring her close in front of the eyes of the elders, and then it says V'yarka, meaning they have to see it. V'nikra Shmo B'Yisrael Beis Chalutza now. Mitzvah b'dayanim lo b'talmidim. It's a mitzvah for the judges to see it, not for the students. Tanya Rabbi Yehuda Pamachas Yin Yoshua V'nei Rabbi Tarfon Basi V'Amalechotz. One time we're sitting there and there came a case of chalitza. V'Amalechotz Anu Kulchem Chalutza now, Chalutza now, Chalutza now. Everybody needs to respond Chalutza now, Chalutza now, Chalutza now. So that is Hadran Alach Mitzvahs Chalitza. We've come to the conclusion of this chapter called Mitzvahs Chalitza. We'll stop here. Anybody if has any questions, I'm happy to address.